Good morning, everyone. Nice to see you all. The dedicated crowd, people that show up 9 in the morning to talk after a great after party last night. So happy to have you here. Today you'll learn why the concept of an empowered engineer is really important. If you work as a leader, a company leader or team leader, you're going to understand why you and your organization is less innovative because you don't have empowered engineers. And by that, we also will see why the industry and the world at large is missing out on a lot of innovation power and a lot of creative ideas that could have become true if we just allowed or empowered our engineers more. If you work in an engineering role, you will understand why your company needs you to do more than code in order to unlock your full potential and in order to build the great products that you want to build and not just build good software. And I'll also dive into 6 specific skills which I think are really important in order to be able to cope with an empowered environment. Because if you are privileged to work in this type of environment, that means that your work is going to look differently. It's not going to be what you expect it to be. So the 6 skills I'm going to go through are probably not going to be the skills you thought they're going to be. So hang in there. My name is Martin Mazur. I work as the Chief Product and Technology Officer at 1337, or Trenton 37, as we say in Swedish. We're a Swedish consultancy, which mainly helps our clients build and develop their own development organizations. I've worked more than 20 years, all of them in the consultancy industry. I've had roles from everything from software developer to CEO, albeit that was a very, very short while. Doesn't fit my personality type. And throughout those 20 years, I've seen many organizations. I've seen small organizations, large organizations. I've seen organizations that function extremely well. And I've also seen the organizations that do this really badly. And it's upon this experience that I draw when I come here and talk to you today about the concept of empowered engineer. So, what has happened? Why is this talk more important now than ever before? Because the concept in itself isn't new. But the thing that's been happening, and it's not really been happening now, it's been happening for 20 years, is we've been digitizing more and more things, right? So, if you read any type of business press or Harvard Business Review, any types of reports like that all the C-level people read, it's always going to be digitization this, digitization that. And the companies just feel left behind, especially companies that aren't tech companies, that don't come from the tech industry, right? They're panicking. They're like, oh, well, we need to do something about this. So basically, that means that they have to radically rethink how they serve their customers and how they compete in this new market. So for instance, when coming over here to Oslo from Lund, Sweden, I had 3 different types of transportation. And for every mode of transportation, I had to get a ticket. And that ticket hit at least 3 different apps. And those are only the pieces of software on the front end. So from the moment you wake up until you go into your job or until you go into what you're doing, the amounts of pieces of software, the amounts of pieces of technology that you hit is tremendous. So the quality of that software, how well that functions, is the quality of our lives. And this is why this concept is so important. Because we're not in the IT boom anymore. We're not just building stuff for fun. I mean, we're allowed to have fun, but we're not doing it just for, oh, look what I could do. The stuff we do is actually impacting people's lives. It's impacting for real. And you don't really have to work in like healthcare or any industry like that to know that you have an impact. Regardless of what you do, even if your company sells t-shirts online, that touches people. So the issue with this is that a few years back, a lot of these companies were still kind of competing on a local market. So, you were selling stuff in Sweden, or you're doing business in Sweden or in Norway. You were competing against other people doing business in Sweden and Norway. The thing is, our context has now expanded, especially since we had those 2 years that we do not speak of. Because now everything's connected. And our businesses and teams, they don't exist in a vacuum anymore. They don't operate in a local business environment anymore. So this means that anything that happens, basically anywhere in the world, affects your team somehow. So when you were on a local market, you might get market disruptions, like once a month, like once a quarter. Now, we have market disruptions every week. There is a new event happening that we have to pivot towards or pivot away from or take into account for the stuff we're doing. So the context has expanded. People move jobs more, people move countries more, people even move continents. So it's fair to say that we're competing on a global market. Regardless what business you're in, you're probably competing on a global market. And the second thing is that we have access to more information today than we've ever had before. I'm sure you've been to at least one AI talk during this conference. I've been to like 3 of them. And all of that is based on data gathering and data information, right? And we're almost drowned in all of this information. Companies gather information, and sometimes when I go into organizations, I'm asking them, like, why are you collecting this? Like, why are you storing? It's like, storage is cheap, and we might need it in the future. So we end up with these tremendous troves of data. And I would sometimes even argue we have too much data, so we don't really know what to do with. And the data is of varying quality. And then our business leaders, the C-level or the board members or somebody, looks at it and they go into planning, and they discover that good decisions have become really hard to make because the amount of data is now allowing them to always find a reason not to do something, right? So you can always argue that, there's this piece of information and it's telling me that, we shouldn't do this or we shouldn't do that. So it's easier to figure out what not to do than what to do. The result of this in our industry is these long-term plans. Or, we don't call them plans. That's not fashionable anymore. We call them roadmaps. So somebody somewhere produces a roadmap, 5 years, maybe 3 years. Maybe you're a good company. Maybe it's only 1 year. The roadmap says, like, we've accounted for all of this stuff happening. So this is what we need to do with our software. This is what we need to build. We're also accounted for, the change and everything. So, thing is, that's never actually how it works. Like, once you get to implementing that piece of software, the world has changed. We talked about this. The context has expanded to such proportions that there's going to be a disruptive event. And at the point in time when you get to that milestone in the roadmap or thing in the roadmap that you need to build, it's already too late or it's already wrong. And we see this especially in larger organizations, right? So we have big companies, a lot of them in the financial industry. When neobanking or the smaller banks were coming on the market, they were looking at the banks. They can look at the market. They know what's happening. It's not like they didn't understand that these people were coming into the industry. They're looking at them, and they're saying, yeah, that's cute, but that's not, they're not competing in our market because they don't have the product portfolio that we have, and they will never be able to offer all the things that we offer. So, let them do their cute thing over there. And then the smaller specific neobanks kind of grew a little bit more. And some customers started jumping from the larger banks into these smaller banks. So the banks look at them again and go like, yeah, that's nice, but those customers were never our core target customer anyway. So it doesn't really matter. Let them have their new, cool, flashy bank. A couple of years pass and so a few more customers jump. And at that time, the bank goes like, hey, what's going on there? Like, we actually like those customers. And then they go into planning mode. But by that time, it's already too late because the other bank has already been functioning in a much more leaner setup without technology debt for 5 to 8 years. And there's no way for the big incumbent bank to chase that market at this point in time. So we build these plans for X. We want to get to X, and maybe they account for the time, Y that's going to take to get there, so Y plus time. And it just never works, and we still kind of keep doing it. And the pandemic was also kind of evidence of how badly that worked, because nobody could account for that. And people still try to go and deliver their pre-pandemic roadmaps. The result, where does all of this kind of road mapping and planning end us up? Well, it ends us up here. So when we look into large, medium-sized corporations, 37% of the software that they have is never or rarely used, right? And even worse, of the remaining 63%, there's about 80% of features that are never or rarely used in that software. They completely missed the mark on all of the things that they were developing. Completely. This is an unsustainable situation. We're in an industry where everybody's talking about, well, we don't have enough technologists, we don't have enough engineers, we don't have enough of this, we don't have enough of that. And then we run off and we waste the people we have on doing this stuff that doesn't matter, that doesn't really impact anyone. It's a waste of money. It's a waste of human potential. I don't want to work on systems that nobody's going to use in the end. And it's just sad. So this doesn't happen with all companies. There are some companies that get this right. They build these extraordinary products that customers love, right? And you know what companies I'm talking about. It's the products you use every day. It's like the Spotifys, the Netflix, the Amazons, and it's just, they're just different from your time reporting system or your whatever system you have in your company, or maybe even what your own company is delivering to the market. So what makes these companies different? Like, do they have better people? Do they have, better leadership? Like, what's the secret? The thing is that they manage to deliver these extraordinary products on pretty much the same circumstances as everybody else. They don't get better people. You do have great people in your company. It's just that they understand something that a lot of other companies don't understand. And of course, there's like no presentation is complete without a Steve Jobs or a Bill Gates quote. So here comes the obligatory Steve Jobs quote. A lot of times people don't know what they want until you show it to them, right? And there's a Henry Ford example of this as well, where I think it's, if I would ever ask my clients what it is they want, they would have said a faster horse. Great products don't come from customers. The customer doesn't know what the great product is. No customer ever asked for a product. No customer ever asked for the iPhone. The thing is the customers do have is they have problems. Real life problems that they experience. But they don't know what's possible with technology, with the technology that just now became available. and neither do managers, C-suite, a lot of UX designers, requirements analysts, product owners, your shareholders. None of them know what's possible with the technology. The people that know what's possible to do with the technology that just now became available are the engineers. But hey, engineers are scarce, so we put them in a corner and we tell them, don't worry about the product. You just focus on your coding stuff, right? I'm going to come here with requirements and you build those requirements. You don't worry about the rest. Like we'll figure it out. And then we get a bunch of unused software. But this is what some great companies understand, right? And the fact is, all of you could be doing this too. That's what this talk is about. The problem in most companies I encounter is that the setup is built in such a way that that becomes almost impossible. It's this feature factory that I was talking about. The engineers, software developers, they're locked away somewhere. They get fed requirements either through, sticky notes or index cards or Jira tickets or whatever. And as long as they deliver on those things up to specification, they did a good job. It's quite comfortable, actually. We get well compensated for just delivering up to specification as well. Whether that product actually made an impact for the customer, whether that product actually changed somebody's life, or whether that feature was actually ever used by someone. Not our problem, right? The best products are customer-inspired, based on real customer problems and technology-enabled. So when I talk about the concept of the empowered software engineer, I'm talking about somebody that works really closely inside of the discovery process of figuring out how do we solve the customer's problem with the technology that just now became available. So if you look at these teams, or if you look at these companies, they have this way of working. The purpose of the team is, number one, to innovate on behalf of the customer. We've been through this. So you're not innovating on behalf of the business, you're not innovating on behalf of your manager or the stakeholder, you're innovating on behalf of the customer. Customer is front and center. Second thing is, with products that the customers love, and love is a strong word. It's not like, or for people of you to time report, tolerate. They love the system. They want to use the system again and come back to the system. And lastly, in ways that meet the needs of our business. So this doesn't mean we can run off and do whatever we want. This means we still need to pay attention to what type of business is our company in. So if we're building a time reporting system, we're not going to go out and say like, hey, I talked to a customer and this one customer over here, they would really love a rocket ship. Could we build them a rocket ship? That's not our business. Our business is time reporting, but inside of that kind of context, we can innovate. So to innovate on behalf of the customer with products that the customers love in ways that meet the needs of our business, right? So we're not completely off the hook. We can't do whatever we want, but we still have a lot of freedom. And and when you start working inside of this team, the work, it looks differently than it would in the teams that most people I meet work in. So these teams are, number one, they're assigned customer or business problems to solve. So we go away from the whole idea of tickets or requirements or build this or whatever. You instead get a customer problem to solve. And a customer problem, it could be phrased differently, or a business problem could be phrased differently. If you work in, say, e-commerce, it could be, we don't have the correct conversion rate on X, Y, Z. You don't get more information than that. Now, please go fix this. And then the team is responsible to kind of figure out How are we going to fix this? Is this a shopping cart problem? Is this a product listing problem? Is this a payment problem? That's up to the team to figure out. It could also be in the context of a very popular audio streaming service. We're losing market share, or we're not taking market share from people that listen a lot to radio. You give that problem to a few teams and you go, now you go off and fix this. And they start figuring things out, like daily drive or a new shuffle function or release radar, or bringing podcasts on the platform to make it more like radio. So it's giving the context of what do we want solved, but not giving the solution, and then letting the team work on that solution and figuring out the best way to solve that. Yeah, so figuring out the best way to solve that. So empowered to discover and deliver effective solutions. So this means the team really needs to have all the resources at hand in order to do the work I just described. So you can't just put up a team with only engineers. You're probably going to need UX people on the team if the slice of product you're working on is touching a user. You're going to need a product manager that helps you out with a lot of other stuff and gathering data and information. You might need, depending on how you work with quality, you might need a quality engineer or quality coach, or you might need security people. Sometimes in specific products, you might need somebody that's working with legal, but you need all this stuff inside of your team to be able to both discover and deliver the solution effectively. And lastly, and most importantly, and this is the part that people don't really like, especially the engineers, they're held accountable for the results, right? So what does it mean to be accountable for the results? Well, it means that if it didn't work, it's on you to fix it. Plain and simple, right? So if we were supposed to fix the conversion rate of our site, we did the discovery, so we tried a bunch of prototypes, we tested it, we thought this was the right solution, we implemented it, and we released it, and we're not getting the results we expected. It's on us to go back and fix it. We're not done with the feature. Right? If we wanted to make customers happy when they time report, we built a new feature, we released it, and they're all of a sudden not happy, or still not happy. We didn't meet the mark, and it's up on us to go back and fix it. If our product crashes, it's up to us to fix it. So we're accountable. So if you're on a team that works this way, this is going to be a very different way for you to work as an engineer. Because, as I said, we've been trapped away in these feature factories for years and years and years. And we've been told that we should focus on what we're good at, right? We shouldn't go out and don't go out and talk too much to the customers. Don't talk to the other, people in the organization. Sit code, do that for as much as possible. And there are reasons for this, right? We talked about scarcity inside of software engineering. So one reason for this happening is that scarcity thing. That people trying, I'm going to take all the other work off your hands so you can focus on this. But this talk, when I made this talk, we weren't talking about the concepts that a lot of speakers have been talking about today, like are software engineers going to be out of a job because of AI? We're not. I'm pretty sure we're not. Because software engineering is about solving problems. It's about solving user problems. But the amount we spend on writing boilerplate code is definitely going to drastically drop. So we need to figure out other things that are valuable inside of that problem-solving space. So the empowered engineers become twofold important. It's important for you in order to be relevant in the new job market, and it's important to your customers because they want great products that they love and can use. So if we look at the journey of a software engineer, the way I usually see it happening in a lot of people is, number one, you focus on doing the bug-free, elegant, nice code, right? And when you move past that, you go like, all right, I want to build awesome systems. Awesome systems, that's systems that are fault tolerant, well-designed, scalable, all of those things. Third level, that's when you get to great products. But the thing is, to get to the third level, the skills that got you to level 1 and 2 are not going to take you there. So, in an empowered team, engineers are accountable for both feasibility, like can we build it, and delivery, like can we build it and delivery. But then there's also, is the product valuable to the customer? Is it viable, and is it usable, right? And we're not going to be off the hook for those things, even if we have other people working on that. So my argument here is that if you join this talk, I would assume that most of you are kind of on the I already know how to build an awesome system. If you're an engineer, there's probably people here that are team leads or CTOs or other types of things. But if you're an engineer, you're probably on the level where you already know how to build an awesome system. So getting better at coding and technical skills, right? Deepening your expertise is only going to get you that far. And the better you get at your expertise, at your depth, the more hours you have to put in to progress a little bit more. It's like in a computer game, the last levels are really, really hard to reach. You have to grind a lot of experience points. But the interesting thing is, there's this concept of the T-shaped professional, or the T-shaped individual, where we do have a skill spectra. So when you pick up a new skill, when you pick up something that's not your core skill, the progress goes really quickly. You can read one book or take one course, and you immediately get new insights into how much better you can get. So my argument is that most people that work as software engineers or in software really don't need to get better at the tech, really don't need to get better at coding that much, because we already do that on the job. But the real value becomes in kind of expanding your skill scope and widening what you do. This will allow you to have more understanding for what other people that work beside you inside of your company do. So what the UXers do, what the PMs do, what everybody else does is going to help you understand your customers, the operations side, the security side. So widening your skill scope is actually a really good investment. All right, so let's move into the skills. I promised you I'm going to go through 6 skills, what I believe any empowered software engineer needs. All of these skills are about leaving the predictable behind and coping with empowered work. Because the number one issue I see when moving into organizations and trying to change an organization to work inside of this type of model is that people on the engineering side don't have the skills to cope with uncertainty, don't have the skills to cope with things that are unpredictable. And a lot of this stuff is unpredictable. I'm asking you to fix conversion rates on our site. And you're done when you're done. You're done when the solution works for the customer. It was better before. I had my iteration. I had to do 22 story points. And when I did 22 story points, I was a good developer. And I get to go home. And now you expect me to deliver business results. So it does require some new skills. And when we do these transformations, somebody asks me, how successful is this? And I usually say like this, of course, this is not like a real statistic. It's an approximation. About 1/3 of the developers that hear about this go like, yes, best thing I've ever heard about. I want to do this. When can we get started? I've been waiting for this all my life. 1/3 are like, nah, this seems a little bit weird, like, but I'm willing to try. Like, I'm willing to try. And you can convince those people. You can educate them. You can raise their competence level. You can get them on board. 1/3 of developers are never going to accept to work in this type of way. And that's okay. But if your organization is moving into this type of work, those people might not be fit for your organization. And that's really hard to hear for a lot of companies. So let's move back to this, the work. And let's focus on the first line here. Assigned customer or business problems to solve. 2 skills in order to do that. One skill, I love this, goal setting, right? And this is really scary for a lot of people who work in software, because I don't know how it is in Norway or where you're from, but in Sweden we have these development talks, and they're mandatory, so you have to go there. Basically, your manager sits down and says like, so, what are your goals for the next 3 to 5 years? Everybody hates those talks. And then we're forced to make something up. It's like, oh, I'm going to learn Redis, or whatever. These people just make shit up. That's actually not what they want to do, because they haven't thought through this. But the thing in an empowered team is, all of a sudden, nobody's going to tell you what to do. So if you walk in the morning into your product team and nobody told you what to do, where are you going to get started? So this becomes a really important skill. And I usually talk about goals in two different aspects. And the aspect that developers are a little bit allergic to is the aspect called the map, right? And this is where I'm going, and that's when I'm expected to be there. The second aspect, which a lot of people, when I explain it, find much more enjoyable, is the compass. A compass, it has a direction. It doesn't have a destination. I'm going that way, right? I'm going to get better at that thing, or I want to be this type of person. And the compass are our values. That's what constantly navigates us and drives us towards a specific direction. And when we walk with the compass, we sometimes, get to a mountain and have to walk around the mountain, and that's fine, but we can still find our bearing to get north. The problem is, if you just have the compass, you don't know when you got there. So you really do need a map. You really do need a place where you set down a map and say, like, listen, we're going north, and this is the spot we're going to try to hit. And the thing about setting goals is, if you set a goal, it's not going to be less likely that thing occurs, which I feel a lot of people kind of feel that. Like, I don't want to write it down, or I don't want to say it, because then maybe it won't happen, or people will know I failed. And because it's kind of like, buying insurance, life insurance, is not going to make you more likely to die. It's the same kind of concept. And the other thing is, setting a goal won't make it hurt more when you don't achieve it. It's going to be the same sucky feeling anyway. So getting better at goal setting is one of the things I believe a lot of people inside of software engineering need to get better at. And there's a lot of different frameworks to do this. There's SMART goals, Zig Ziglar's 7 Steps to Success. It really doesn't matter which one you pick or which way you go. But kind of accepting that this is a skill that you need to have and investing in learning it, that's going to be important. And here's one reference. So this is a Zig Ziglar book, Goals, Planning, and Actions. It's a decent book. It's one book you can use for lack of better resources, but like whatever works for you. So the next skill is about decision making. So making good decisions. So what's actually a decision? A decision is kind of an investment. We take time, money, resources, whatever, and we bet them on something that's going to give us an upside later on, right? So we are not sure about what's going to happen when we make the decision. But the thing is, making decisions, we need to separate two things. We need to separate what's a good decision from what's a good outcome. And a good decision is a decision that you made on good basis. With the information at hand, if nothing changed, you would have made the same decision over and over again. It's a bet. You have odds. And those odds change. I don't know if how many here play like sports betting and stuff like that. But when a game in sports betting starts, like say a football match, you get odds, like we think this team is going to win. And then as the game progresses, the odds change because there's more information available. That's exactly how decisions are made. So when we're asked to do the decision, we're never going to have complete information. And this is what screws up some software engineers when they're faced with a decision. We need to start developing tomorrow. Please pick me a framework. Oh, we need to go out and do research. No, we're developing tomorrow. Like with the information that you have in your team, make the decision. So you always are faced with making these decisions on incomplete information. And you can still feel that, given what we understood at that point in time, we made the right decision, but the outcome could be good or bad. And people usually connect these two together. So when the outcome becomes bad, they say, oh, that was a bad decision. It wasn't. The decision was still good. The outcome was bad. And it's also the other way around. You can, make a bad decision and sometimes get lucky and have a great outcome. That doesn't make the decision good. The reason this becomes important is because two things can happen. One, we can get stuck in analysis paralysis. So now we have to move quickly. We have to react to what's happening in the world. We're faced with these things. All of a sudden, we have business metrics. They could be dropping. We need to make decisions today on what we're going to build. And we are like, oh, I don't have all the information. So now we go over and overanalyze, and we try to figure out all the information, and we're back to, doing roadmaps. Make the decision. Make it quick. The second one is if you don't make a decision, the world's going to make the decision for you. So not making a decision is also a decision. So this becomes more important in an empowered, this is important anyway, but it becomes more important in an empowered team. Because all of a sudden, when you're accountable, the stakes are slightly higher, right? We're talking about real metrics, real people, real money. So the engineering team is all of a sudden an extension of the business in a completely different way. So here's Annie Duke's book, Thinking in Bets. This one I actually like. This is a great book. So this is a book about kind of helping you make decisions when you don't have all the information available, right? So that's one resource, but there's also a lot of other resources around this. My point here is not to teach you these skills. It's to show you what skills you might need to have when you go out. So for your next conference or for your next development plan, this is stuff you can integrate. Cool. That was point number one. So let's move into point number two. Empowered to discover and deliver effective solutions. What do we need to know in order to be able to do this? First off, design thinking. Two of the best questions I know when building anything is, what is it for and who is it for? Understanding those things is going to get you really, really far. And when I talk about what is it for, it's not like, oh, the time reporting system is for time reporting. No. So let's talk about like what it's actually for. What's an expensive bottle of wine for? Oh, it's for drinking. No. An expensive bottle of wine is a show of status. It's a show of good taste. People that buy expensive bottles of wine, they buy them because they want to say something about themselves. They communicate, like, I made it, I'm successful, I can buy this expensive bottle of wine. They want to show that off to their friends, or they want to say, I have good taste, I bought this expensive bottle of wine, or I know a lot about wine, so I bought this expensive bottle of wine. And who is it for? It's for those people that want that type of status and attention and feeling of success, right? So when they design expensive bottles of wine, this is what they designed them for, and this is who they designed them for. And that goes in for all of the products. So you have to dig deeper. You have to dig deeper around the features you build or the systems you build and go like, what is it actually for? Like, what actual problem is it solving, and who is it actually for? Like, who is the actual person I'm doing this for? So 90% of consumer-facing products fail in their first year. And one of the reasons that they do is because they get this wrong. They completely miss the mark on what the product was for. Remember this, your customer's goal is never to use your product. That's not what they want to do. They don't wake up and go like, oh, I really crave to use the ticket buying system for the bus. Customers are there because they want to ride the bus, right? If you understand the why, you're going to get better at building the what. And you also understand when it's time to change. This is really interesting. So Netflix understood that their business wasn't for sending people DVDs in the mail. They understood that their business was to effectively deliver entertainment into people's homes. And when they understood that, and the engineers saw a shift in technology, streaming became just now possible, Netflix saw an opportunity and could make that pivot in time. Kodak, on the other hand, they thought that they were a paper and chemicals company. So when digital photography started to make an emergence in the market, Kodak said like, no, we're not doing that. We're a paper and chemicals company, we're sticking to paper and chemicals. Now we don't have Kodak anymore, but we do have Netflix. So understanding this is also going to help you to change the business when the business needs changing, when those disruptions happen in the market. This is a great book. Donald Norman is a legend in the design space. If you have UXers on your team, they know this person. The design of everyday things, it's not only about the beauty, it's also about the function, and it's also what they're for. But if you don't want to read books, and seriously, if you have UXers on your team, just go talk to them. They know all about this stuff, and they're going to be happy to share it with you. The next skill, weird one. Yes, I do claim that empathy is a skill. I heard a talk yesterday where somebody said that this was like a personality trait. And I strongly disagree with that. Like, empathy is a skill because it can be learned. You're not either born empathetic or not. It's something you train and you become better at it. So empowerment is not always about doing. It's sometimes also about just taking time to understand our customers, our colleagues, or competitors. Why do people do the things that they do? Because that's actually, the empathy part. Like, it's not like I feel you. It's like I see what you did, and I understand why you're doing it. I don't have to agree with you. Like, we can have vividly different standpoints, but I can empathize and understand that with the information that you have, the experiences that you have, whatever you went through, this is a reasonable course of action for you, what's going on right now. So, how do we get to this level of kind of truly understanding somebody else without necessarily agreeing with them? The best exercise I've ever done on this, which I really recommend everybody doing because it's so simple, is you sit down and you imagine a person who you vividly disagree with on something. Like, you disagree with them, so like it hurts on the inside when you think about their view and standpoint. This has to be a person that you've met or know or encountered. And then you write a one-page essay about why they're right. You go through about what happened to them or what have they been going through in order to rationally arrive at these points of view. And you don't do like a surface level job of that. You really dig deep. And once you're done, you give it to somebody else to review and you kind of update it. You do like a retrospective on it. You can do that as many times as you like, but that's going to help you to kind of move into the mindset of being like, I don't have to agree with you, but like I want to know what's going on. Like, I want to understand like how you ended up at that point. So that for me is empathy, seeing someone else and having it make sense to you without actually agreeing to it. Unless you agree. And the book tip here is a little bit weird because it's one of the best books I've read. It's the book that literally changed my whole professional career and how I engage with people. It made me so much better. And it has the worst title in like the history of books. So it's the snake oily title of How to Win Friends and Influence People. But don't get fooled. This is not a book about like how you can mind control others. This is a book about how you can be a nice person, not an asshole, and show empathy and understanding for other people. Because then they're going to listen to you and they're going to want to be your friend. It's simple as that. And this is book, it's on like all the MBA lists. And it was written probably like 60 years ago, and it's still valid today. Great book. All right. So we're moving into the last 2 points, which are a little bit more about accountability, about being accountable to the results. So we talked about it. This isn't you delivered on your story points, or you delivered on your hours, or good job, the system didn't crash. This is actual business results. So we're going to need some new skills in order to actually deliver those business results. The number one thing we're going to need is we're going to have to understand business models. Because we need to understand how the organization we work for is creating value. And I specifically choose value here because value for most organizations is money, but if you work for a nonprofit, value is something else. And you go like, sure, I understand how I create value, but like 10 years ago, nobody understood how Google was creating value. Nobody understood who Google's actual customer was because nobody could figure out the business model. Like, they're giving away like search engines and emails and everything for free. The reason they're doing that is because they're harvesting your information, and their real customer is the people that buy advertising. Right? And the business model is to sell advertising, is not to build free email and free search engines. So you need to understand, what is the business model? Like, how's that working out? And the most fun way of doing this is actually to just look at businesses that you encounter, especially businesses that are free, things that are free to you, and figure out, how are they making their money? How much profit are they making? Like, what are their expenses? And I think the best book for doing this, the hands-down book that actually is a fun read, and it's like a nice coffee table book. You can open it. There's a lot of pretty pictures in it. Is Business Model Generation. It has a big template in it called the Business Model Canvas, If you ever worked in a startup, 100% you did a business model canvas. And inside of that, you have these different blocks that you can fill in with everything from sales channels to customers to value we create to how we, what costs we have, how we make money. And you don't have to fill out all of them. There's some examples in the book how you can just quickly map out models of companies you encounter. But the more times you do that, the more intuitive it becomes. And then when you see somebody presenting a new thing to you, you go like, hey, yeah, I figured out how they make their money. Because when you do that, it's easier for you to then understand when you're building a new feature or when you're solving a new problem. How is this going to be monetized? Because now it's not only about creating a problem, it's about monetization or value generation in some way. And you need to understand that. Of course, you're probably going to have a product manager. This is actually the job of the product manager, but I think it makes the conversation much easier from an engineering perspective if you have this down. All right, last one. Constraints and leverage. There is no such thing as an unlimited playing field. If it's worth designing or building something, it's essential to understand the constraints around it. There's no architect, and I'm talking about like real architects, bad choice of words. I'm talking about house architects that had unlimited time and unlimited resources to build something or unlimited land. There's always a constraint around what you're doing. So great design of systems is to identify those crippling constraints and then easing them or finding ways to work around them or integrate them into our process. So the mentality that I see in a lot of teams is like, oh, if we only had one more person, if we only had a little bit more time, if we only had this technology available to us, if we only had, you don't. Like, that's your constraint. Now you have to figure out a way to solve the problem within that constraint. And these things can become really beautiful sometimes. So there's one story, for instance, about Mick Jagger, Rolling Stones. So everybody knows about Mick Jagger now because, Instagram, TikTok, moves like Jagger, people doing the Jagger dance. But that dance is actually a result of a constraint. Because when the Rolling Stones were starting to play, they played really small clubs. Probably had a stage around this size. So when they set up everything, all the speakers and drum sets and amplifiers and everything they needed on stage, there was only about this small space for Mick to stand on. He had a choice at this point in time. He could just stand there and sing, or he could figure out a way to engage the audience and put on a show within that small space. And that's what he did. He figured out a way to dance and moves like Jagger, inside of that small space that then became legendary. And there's an airline in the US, I can't remember, I think it's Delta, but I might be wrong about that went into a hardship and had to sell one of their planes. But inside of the aviation industry, what you don't want to do, even if you have to sell your planes, is you don't want to lose your flight routes, because the flight routes are the thing that make you money. So what Delta did is like, how can we keep all our flight routes with one less plane? And they're starting to kind of solve this problem, and they come up with an idea, and the idea is, if we can figure out how to do 10-minute turnaround times, then we can keep all our flight routes with one less plane. And they did. And now that became the gold standard for all low-price air flights that we have today, the 10-minute turnaround time, because they showed it was possible, something that everybody thought, like, that's not going to be a thing. Last one from our industry, Zappos selling shoes online. People told them, like, nobody's going to buy shoes online. Shoes is a thing you go to the shoe store to buy. You have to try them on. They have to fit. But Zappos said, like, all right, so what's the constraint here? The constraint is people don't want to buy it because if it doesn't fit, they're afraid the returns and how that's going to function. So there's like, all right, we need to solve two things. One, we need to solve customer service, so great customer service. And the second thing we need to solve is returns, so we implement free returns. Those two things, great customer service and free returns, enabled Zappos to sell shoes online, and then became the gold standard for the whole fashion industry of selling online fashion or clothing. So it's understanding those constraints and thinking deep about how can we use this to our advantage or work around it or figure it out a way, instead of sitting in the corner and saying like, oh, this is not possible because we don't have X. Leverage is the exact opposite of that. So leverage is when we have a problem, we have a solution, but we're thinking too small scale. And leverage is worth to explore, because when we do something and say, this is never going to work, we go like, but what if we made it bigger? Like, we're looking at 100 customers, but what if we talk about 1,000 or 10,000? Will the economy of scale kick in? Is there a scale at which this would work? And the reason you want to look at leverage is because leverage can help you make a business case. And a business case is different from I wish we had. A business case is, if I could get this, then you can get that. It's a transaction. That enables you to escalate these things up the line, and you can get the resources you need in order to deliver what you need to deliver in terms of results. And there's only, for me, there's only one book that really talks about this in a way that's brilliant. And it's a beautiful constraint. This is a book I wish every human being would read, because it's so insightful and has a lot of great stories. And it also has a kind of very systematic approach to how to go through this. All right. So 6 skills. So as I close out today, I'm going to leave you with 3 things to take on your journey as you venture back into your jobs on Monday. So number 1, the important thing here is to learn to define your own work. If you really want to work in this empowered setup, this empowered team model, be the powered engineer, what you need to do is you need to have the skills and capabilities to figure out what to do when nobody's telling you what to do. Right? And that doesn't mean refactoring code or polishing up on stuff. That means, what type of features or functions or pieces of product can I build that are going to be, great for our customers and work for our business. The second one is innovate on behalf of the customer. It's not what your manager wants. It's what helps your customer. If you haven't met a customer for a while, go meet a customer. I've taken whole engineering teams into, I specifically did this with a call center. Working in a call center software, I took the whole engineering team to meet the call center that was using the product. Not to talk to them, just to have them stand there and watch the people use the software. You could see the visceral reaction on some of the engineers when they saw people using the software, because they've never seen that. They've never seen how badly the software is designed for it fit for purpose from the perspective of actual call center worker. And when they got back, they were so engaged into making that product better, not for the business, but for the customer. Because now they've met real people that are impacted by the things that they do. So innovate on behalf of the customer. And lastly, focus on the outcome instead of the output. Just drop the whole idea of how many story points we did, how many hours we worked, how many lines. Nobody measures lines of code, but I'm kidding. But if you do measure lines of code, please stop. How many lines of code we did or whatever. Those are outcomes. Those are outputs. The outcomes are the things that actually impact our customer. What change did we make? What metrics did we move in the right direction? Those types of things. And those might be tricky to figure out. So, it helps if your management is on board with these types of changes. All right. That's it. This is what I'm leaving you with. And we do have a few minutes, or actually we don't, but I am here. So please, what are your questions? If there's any quick ones, I can probably take them on stage. Otherwise, I'm going to stick around afterwards. No, can't see anyone. It's really hard with these bright lights. All right. Thank you so much for coming to my session.